Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This file is being recorded for the March 2021 edition of Socialism for All, and it's an audiobook of The Nuclear War and the Fundamental Problems of Marxism by Posadas from 1963. If you like this video, please click the like and the subscribe buttons and consider supporting us on Patreon. The link to Patreon is in the description. So, this is an extract from a longer work, The Fundamental Problems of Marxism from 1963. Also, specifically, this is from December 25th, 1963, so Christmas. A little background on Posadas. Posadas was a pseudonym for some Argentine Trotskyists, used to be the head, actually, of the Fourth International Latin American Division. And then later, Posadism became kind of like a subsect within Trotskyism that really diverged from mainline Trotskyism. Trotskyism, of course, being itself kind of a sect within Marxism, more adjacent to like Marxism-Leninism, but very anti-Stalinist. Okay, so let's get into the text. The class struggle generates revolutionary struggle. This makes it possible to foresee, organize harmoniously, the destruction of capitalism and the construction of socialism. Capitalist society engenders the proletariat as a force it could not do without, but the proletariat was in contradiction with capitalism. Capitalist society did not welcome the idea, but it could not negate the proletariat without destroying itself. The proletariat developed with the development of capitalism. The existence of the proletariat, a contradictory force, is an intrinsic necessity for the existence of capitalism. At a given moment, the actual numerical weight of the proletariat ceased to be the only factor in opposition to capitalism, when the conscious factor was created, whilst the proletariat, as a class today, develops less than capitalism. It acquires the consciousness that it is possible to do without capitalism. Then the consciousness of the proletariat becomes a more powerful instrument than its strength in numbers. Who is going to win in the struggle between the proletariat and capitalism? Capitalism has the material force, but it is a contradiction between its class and society, and the proletariat and productive forces. There is a contradiction inside the structure of production, the regime of production, and the regime of property. More precisely, there is a contradiction in capitalism between a regime of production that has become socialized and individual appropriation. This puts a definite limit on production. This historic contradiction has to be resolved in the way that either the collective, socialized form dominates production, or individual appropriation becomes the decisive factor. There is no contradiction in history that has not been resolved but by the triumph of one or the other of its opposing poles. This essential contradiction has to be resolved. Capitalism harnesses every means it can to resolve it in its favor. It produces laws, repressions, persecutions, and above all, wars to this end. The first act of capitalism is always to eliminate its competitors. This, of course, resolves nothing in relation to the contradiction between social production and individual appropriation. This essential contradiction goes on and grows. It creates the bases for an antagonism to develop between capitalist society and the working class. This contradiction does not go away because neither one, the bourgeoisie, nor the other, the proletariat, can be eliminated whilst the capitalist system continues. The contradiction we refer to eventually leads to antagonism. Thus, capitalist society is contradictory and antagonistic. The antagonistic factor lies in the existence of the working class. This continues to increase during a short historic period until the inevitable conflagration explodes between the antagonists who had coexisted with each other. A solution is found to the original contradiction if one or the other, capitalism or the proletariat, triumphs. The precise moment when antagonistic forces enter the final collision is called revolution. Marx and Engels were able to elaborate the principles of the party, the international, program, and revolutionary policy, and to visualize the construction of workers' states, socialist countries, because they understood this process and dominated its dialectical evolution. The socio-historic conditions exist to enable us to envisage all this, starting from the basis of the existence of the workers' states. The major hindrance is the bureaucracy in the leadership of the workers' states. It is a factor that creates an immense confusion in the working masses of both the workers' and capitalist states. If the processes of nature are not completely dominated today, it is mainly because the workers' states cannot exercise all their influence, their strength and authority in the world. This is the result of bureaucratic obstacles. Nevertheless, humanity is no longer dominated by the forces of nature or of production. Today, we harness nature sufficiently to create the forces of production necessary, and we could, if we wanted to, control the weather. In the very near future, after capitalism has been eliminated, at the cost of the nuclear war, humanity will begin again on the basis of all the knowledge it has acquired. Humanity will not start again from zero. The most important Marxist materialist conception applies not simply to the class struggle, but to the construction of socialism, and to the confidence of the human being and human society in themselves. The continuity of historic human thought concentrates itself and is called confidence. This confidence arises from the extent of humanity's knowledge of the environment. Class society developed on the basis of the need to defeat the contradiction between providing for all and the possibility of doing so. Lack of knowledge meant that the human being was limited in relation to nature. That is no longer the case today. Undoubtedly, nuclear war will destroy a very important part of the scientific achievements of humanity, but it will not destroy the confidence of humanity. This will be the most important factor in historic continuity. Machines will be destroyed, and they will be rebuilt. What will not be destroyed is the historic confidence accumulated by the process of human thought. Human thought is the most important and perfect instrument. This is why it cannot be destroyed. It is also why capitalism is filled with fear and foreboding. Indeed, Khrushchev, feeling this, has told them the war will be the end of capitalism. The bureaucracy means to add to this declaration, war will be the end of us all. But this is to contain the masses. This is the bureaucracy serving its own interests. But then bureaucracy is idiotic and has no future. The masses of Africa, Asia, and Latin America live in what amounts to nuclear war now. In Africa, the annual income per head is $15 American, whilst it is $2,500 in the United States. The African masses face continual blows, tortures, oppressions, by all imaginable and most inhuman means that can be thought of, but in spite of this, they heap defeat after defeat upon capitalism. The masses do not fear nuclear war. This is the main factor that ensures the continuation of humanity, regardless of the numbers that will remain after the nuclear war. There will be a good many people left alive after the nuclear war, and humanity will rapidly make up for the lost time. The nuclear war is the price to be paid, because capitalism has no other recourse. If we had to wait for 30 or 40 years before advancing to socialism, in order to avoid nuclear war, we would do it. Unfortunately, it does not depend on us, because capitalism has no other recourse but to war. Marxism is a synthesis of the class struggle. The basic tenet is that historic interests motivate how humanity behaves. Nothing in the world can invalidate this conclusion. There are leaders in the USSR and in China who think that imperialism's plans are not the result of their historic interests. They believe that it is possible to dissuade imperialism from pursuing its class interests and using its nuclear weapons. It is not Marxist to reason in this way. Capitalism must be brought down. The situation in the workers' states is improving, and the latter intervene increasingly to help the rest of the world to make progress. Behind the Marxist understanding, however, and the solutions which it offers, there is the knowledge that what is left of the capitalist system must be brought down. The task, therefore, is to help with the formation of cadres, to favor the direct intervention of the masses, and to contribute to the formation of mass power organisms. All at once, this demands from the workers' state that it supports the socialist progress of other countries and its own. Such are the fundamental problems of Marxism today. The relationship masses, society, leadership, revolution, nuclear war is made of elements that cannot be overlooked, separated, or ignored. This is a fundamental problem of Marxism today. Society will not advance further, not even in the realm of scientific knowledge, let alone social knowledge, until it resolves the problem of the continued existence of capitalism. 80% of all energy and intelligence and all the fruits of thought are now devoted to the destruction of humanity. Capitalism has reached the point where its sole aim is to prevent the progress of humanity. The workers' states have no choice but to put all their efforts into defense. All in all, 80% of the energy of humanity is wasted. Humankind does not advance further in its domination of nature, science, and productive forces because it dedicates the larger part of its strength to military ends. In these conditions, going to the moon responds less to social needs than discoveries in the medical field. We do not criticize the Soviet worker state for going to the moon because this highlights its huge capability. Only the drive behind such attainments is forced back by the worker state's need to prepare for the coming conflagration of the final settlement of accounts. The steady approach of the final settlement of accounts swallows up an increasing mass of worker states' capabilities, scientific, economic, and social. Capitalism concentrates all its forces to secure the first strike against the worker state. This limits capitalist society too. It stops it developing. Not that it was developing very much anymore, but now even production in capitalism is stalled. The Soviet worker state pours all its resources into defending itself from the world nuclear war that capitalism prepares. Such are the fundamental problems of Marxism today. J. Posadas, December 25th, 1963. So commenting here, I probably should have commented before, but I didn't, that the last Posadas audiobook we did, I believe was from 1960, and it was a relatively straightforward take on extending the revolution in Cuba. Okay. From that, we go now to this 1963 borderline 1964 piece about nuclear war, which is, of course, one of the more far-out topics that Posadism is known for, and, which attracts interest in it, which is partly why I'm putting it on the channel. To be honest, it's something that attracts people's attention, and let's talk about it then. So I think, Posadas here has made the leap into more speculative theories, which are well outside of the mainstream of Marxism, some of which are correct, some of which are incorrect, just speaking historically, by the historical record. So in 2021, early 2021, we're basically 57 years on from 1963, or, well, Christmas 1963. So we're a little bit over 57 years here in March 2021. Did capitalism have to resort to nuclear war? Well, we haven't had one, so apparently not. The thing that strikes me, though, well, there's a few things. Posadas was very much correct, and this was fairly early, in 1963, that the imperialist countries were absolutely wearing down the Soviet Union with forcing it to divert so much energy into its military. This is commonly cited as one of the main things that brought down the Soviet Union, which, at the end of the day, was illegally dissolved in a coup that was against Soviet public opinion by a lot. There was a referendum held on the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and basically 76% of the overall people in the Soviet Union did not want to break up. There were a few countries that overwhelmingly did vote that they didn't want to be in the Soviet Union. Most of the countries and most of the just population by raw head count did not want it to break up. In fact, we saw a terrible economic downturn after capitalists were let back in, liberalization, privatization ensued, living standards dropped, health indexes dropped. It was not good. I mean, objectively, it was not good by any objective social statistic that we use to measure the health and well-being of the people of a country. So Posadas could see this in the early 1960s. Credit, one to Posadas. The assertions about nuclear war, I'll give him this. I do think that the longer capitalism is allowed to persist in the world, it will continue to be a drain. And it sounds to me here like Posadas is saying, just do the nuclear war, get it over with, capitalism will lose, socialists will be able to rebuild. That seems to be Posadas's thesis around nuclear war. I note a striking tone change in this versus previous publications by Posadas. Just the whole statement of Marxist principles is very different. It may just be the style of the work that this was taken from, but it's significantly different. And people sometimes point to the fact that, in their opinion, Posadas was like tortured to insanity, and that's when he started sort of writing some of this stuff. I don't think you necessarily have to be insane to write some of this stuff. The embrace of nuclear war does strike me as a little haphazard at best. Let's put it that way. Of course, I'm using comical understatement there. But I think that some of the thinking around that, not necessarily, I think nuclear war has such long range consequences with the radioactive fallout and everything that, let alone the, mass civilian deaths that engenders. There's a lot of drawbacks, like long-term drawbacks to nuclear war. I don't know if at this point they had devised the theory, for example, of nuclear winter. Nuclear winter basically says that in an all-out nuclear war, there would be so much ash and debris launched into the atmosphere that it could effectively block sunlight, triggering a whole ecological collapse because plants wouldn't be able to photosynthesize and, picture, it would just be terrible. Anyway, I don't know if that had come up yet, but he seems to sort of be willing to take a huge risk here, a huge risk. Now, I get it. As Marxists, we want to think in terms of historical epochs and eras. That still strikes me as monstrous, though. Not going to lie. I get it, though, that the longer that capitalism is allowed to persist, the more it is a drain on humanity. So much, the longer we let this war go on, and it is a war, as long as capitalism exists, we are fighting against it. The longer that we do not achieve, the more time passes before we achieve final victory, that's time that we're living through wartime. And our time and resources are being taken up by that war. If we were to end the war in a victory, then, okay, great. You can put your resources towards more constructive things. So, he quoted Khrushchev that the war will be the end of capitalism. Well, the war never came. And in fact, the Soviet Union was destroyed without nuclear war. China goes on, Cuba, North Korea, Laos, Vietnam, with the exception of China, relatively small countries. They still serve as good examples of development and providing good living standards in a non-imperialist country to the working people of that country. Countries of comparable size that have capitalist economies aren't doing as well. You'll have a worse living standard if you're in a comparably sized capitalist country compared to a Cuba, etc. So socialism is superior, but imperialism lingers on. It continues to be a cancer. And, offering some charity here to Posadas, I get the point. I do think that he's way off base. And let me quote a section here again. The masses do not fear nuclear war. That's a quote from what I just read. I'm not really so sure about that, actually. I wonder what he was drawing from there, or if that is just some rhetorical device. Basically he's saying here that it's a lib position to oppose nuclear war. I'm not really sure that, like, actually most people feel that way. What do you think? Leave a comment. Continuing to quote, the masses do not fear nuclear war. This is the main factor that ensures the continuation of humanity, regardless of the numbers that will remain after the nuclear war. There will be a good many people left alive after the nuclear war, and humanity will rapidly make up for the lost time. I think that is overconfident, let's put it mildly. And we have another time frame prediction. Quote, if we had to wait for 30 or 40 years before advancing to socialism, well, that would have been 93. Soviet Union was not looking so good in 93. Or 40 years, that would have been 2003. That was the year that the war on terror went into Iraq. If we had to wait for 30 or 40 years before advancing to socialism in order to avoid nuclear war, we would do it. Unfortunately, it does not depend on us because capitalism has no other recourse but to war. Well, again, capitalism was able to put down the Soviet Union without nuclear war. So what now, Posadas? Maybe we will learn, because I believe these Posadas writings go up to the early 80s. I'd be very curious about what Posadas has to say, and we will learn together as we do these readings. I don't know. I, for one, am glad there hasn't been nuclear war. I think, honestly, that the devastation caused by that would be roughly equal to what we're already seeing. You know, I don't know what to say. I mean, either way, we have some really bad outcomes. Imperialism has been allowed to continue, and we're getting climate emergency, climate disaster. If we had had the nuclear war and socialism had been rebuilding, it would be doing so also with a terrible ecological situation that, if the theory of nuclear winter is accurate, could be as bad as or worse than climate crisis. We absolutely need to end imperialism. I think that the most significant effort towards that right now is China's Belt and Road, New Silk Road project. It is not, putting guns in the hands of revolutionaries necessarily. That was more of the Soviet Union's way. But China is developing a reputation around the world as a much more reliable development partner than the Western imperialists. They may actually outcompete imperialism on the world stage. Their system is honestly proving superior, especially under COVID. So if we can avoid both nuclear war and climate crisis by a rapid change to socialism now, I would love it. Anyway, big questions. We don't talk so much today about nuclear war. But after the U.S. dropped the bomb on Japan in World War II, in 1945, I mean, this was only 18 years after that. We don't talk about it so much today because Nixon wanted to nuke Vietnam. That would have been horrible. So, I mean, some of these predictions came close, I guess, because who knows what would have happened if Nixon had nuked Vietnam, how that might have escalated or changed history. What do you think? I'm going to leave it there. Leave a comment. Thanks for listening. We'll be doing a couple of Posadas texts per month, so we'll keep this thread going into the future. Thanks for listening. And that's the video. Thanks to our current patrons whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen or just support us financially, you can go to patreon.com/socialismforall and sign up for a monthly donation. You can also follow us at facebook.com/socialism4all. Used to have a page at FOR all, and it got throttled to death by Zuck. Here on YouTube, please click the like button, subscribe button, and the notifications bell. Please leave a comment if you can, and please share our video wherever you're online, your Twitter feed, your Discord servers, Reddit subs, etc. All of that helps more people to see this content, whether it's in the YouTube algorithm or just posting it on other sites. All of that's helpful. All of you out there supporting and promoting this content makes it all go that much more smoothly. We need to end capitalism, normalize talking about socialism today, and it's really kind of our only hope for a better tomorrow. Thanks for all you do, and we will catch you in the next video.